Okay, this is Mike Lorrain. We're back at the Northwest Pinball and Arcade Show 2012, and it's what time is it? 5 minutes to 11, but you know what? This late in the day, this is where cool things happen. And I'm standing here with a terrific artist, Doug Watson, who's come up here from California, and he's going to give a seminar talk tomorrow. Doug, it's great to have you with us. And
great to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm anxious to hear, just kind of for everyone listening, can you just tell me a little bit of some of the art you've done for pinball that people might be familiar with?
Wow, I've done, I was a pinball artist for 17 years, from 79 to about 1996. I worked on approximately 30 pinball games. Amongst them are some of the more licensed games like Terminator 2, which we're going to give away later on tonight, Indiana Jones, The Shadow. Other people remember more of my original titles like Barracora or Dragon Fist, Attack from Mars. The list just goes on and on.
So tell me, as far as art techniques at the time, what kinds of things did you use, like paint, oils? How did you do the art? Like, for instance, let's just talk about Indiana Jones, for an example. That's a pin I own, love it. Can you just tell me how you did the art?
I used something that I discovered back in the 1980s called water-based oil to paint that with. It was oil paint that came in a tube, you could buy it, but because you mixed it with water to thin it, as opposed to linseed oil or varnish or the other mediums that oil paint normally goes with, it had a very fast drying time. That drying time was very, very necessary for us in those fields to work with, because sometimes it's just got to go off to be photographed very quickly. And I had tried out acrylics. As a painting style, I can't stand painting with acrylics. They dry too fast, and when acrylics dry, they actually change color from what you mixed to what it dries as a color. All of us illustrators used whatever kinds of mediums that we preferred at the time. I latched onto those oil paints, and I used them for about a decade to do the painted pieces that I did. But my career goes back earlier, before four-color process back glasses, so I did a lot of color separation and cutting and tiny little detailed ink work for the work that I did on many games of pinball.
See, I think a lot of people are thinking, what, Photoshop? But don't you just kind of paint in Photoshop? But it's kind of like that's the days of analog. But to me, that's so important, because there's a randomness in life that we try to achieve with art, and I think that, like you talk about with the oils, that's a huge science to get it to look amazing.
Well, I'm a Photoshop guru now. I actually teach it at the Academy of Art in San Francisco. And I can do in Photoshop in an hour what would take me a week to do before digital technology came along to help artists out.
That's the benefit. Time.
Yes, and I still use Photoshop now to help design the fine art paintings that I do now. It's just the greatest art tool ever imagined, ever developed, but in the end, when you create something on a computer, whether it's in Maya or Max, Photoshop, Illustrator, all you've actually created is a file. You haven't actually created any art. That file can be endlessly reproduced, that file can be printed out, that file can be translated into a program and brought to life in a 3D game engine, but it doesn't actually exist as something you can touch, feel, and own. So I'm going back to my roots now and creating artwork that is just artwork.
So you're going to give a seminar tomorrow.
Yep.
And could you give the audience kind of a preview of what you're going to talk about?
My topic tomorrow's seminar is I'm going to talk about the influences on how I came up with the artwork and the games and the concepts and ideas that I actually did. I didn't invent them in a vacuum. Those ideas all came from somewhere. Other artists influenced me, motion pictures influenced me, great illustrators influenced me, classic illustrators influenced me. So I'm going to take you on a sort of like a flowchart journey about where the idea came from in the first place, and then where it went through to finally end up on the games that I did. In other words, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants in my illustration career, and they deserve credit for the role they played in the games that I did.
One thing we were kind of chatting earlier, and we didn't get that film, unfortunately, but we were talking about the joy of your memories of just being a part of some great teams. Would you care to just talk briefly about a great memory you have of working with some terrific programmers and game designers, and pick a pin, any pin that you remember that you have fond memories of project?
My fondest memory of being on a development team that we developed at Williams was Attack from Mars with Brian Eddy. He was a programmer who became a designer. He's a good friend. We had a great working rapport. But just as important was my career over time working with Steve Ritchie, because he didn't know who I was when I first came to Williams, and it took several games to actually earn Steve's respect as a real contributor to what the entire game could be about, not just someone who decorated the box when he was done with it. So by the time he and I had been through F-14 Tomcat and Black Knight 2000 and we got to Terminator 2, we actually had developed a strong working relationship creatively, so a great deal of what went into T2 is my contribution, as well as the whole team coming together. And the teams that made pinball games, unlike video games that have hundreds of people on the teams, 6 of us would make a pinball game. Just 6. 1 artist, 1 programmer, 1 designer, 1 electrical engineer. That tiny handful of people came up with these miniature amusement parks, miniature imaginary worlds that pinball became in the 90s. So have that much contribution in a project when you're working on a team, there wasn't anything I've ever done in my life or ever will do in my life as fun as working on those pinball teams.
So Steve is here with us also at the show. Can you think of a specific memory you have working with Steve that you might care to share?
Sure. I was assigned with Steve to do his sequel to his great legendary hit Black Knight. This was 1989. He's going to do Black Knight 2000, a similar double-level playfield that he's going to do all over again. And I went, okay, I remember what Tony Ramuni, the artist on the first one, did. Now it's time for Doug Watson to show what he can do with this theme. So I had sketched up the idea of a futuristic knight riding on the back of a flying pteranodon with all the medieval barding flowing off the dinosaur's body, all this equipment, this huge long lance coming out front, this amazing armor costume I came up with, and then this entire world of the landscape that these knights would have duels in the skies over with these riding dinosaurs. And I showed it to Steve, and he went, no. And I said, well, how about this? And he went, no. And I said, how about that? And he said, no. And I came back day after day and said, please, 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 let me do something creative, until he finally just said to me, Doug, all I want is a black knight on a black horse with lightning bolts. So when you look at Black Knight 2000, you get a black knight on a black horse with lightning bolts. And that's it. And you know what? It turned out to be one of his favorite game packages of all time, so go figure.
You know, that just, I mean, so much of it is collaboration, being willing to take direction, take criticism, and you just demonstrated how well you took that, and then you delivered what the director asked for. You made him very happy, and what you did is great. I love the Black Knight 2000 back glass. It's a beautiful art.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, just happy to be here. This is my first year in Seattle. I love the city so far. I love the crowd, I love the people. This is a very good crew you have putting together the show here. Please, if you have any opportunity this weekend to come down, please come down, see this show. It's worth it.
Please tune in tomorrow for Doug's seminar. It's going to be a great one. Doug, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.